St. Simon's in Fort Walton Beach. And I still remember the first time that I went there as your bishop to this church where I was baptized, confirmed, and ordained. And I will confess that I was a little bit more nervous than usual, so I worked on my sermon a little bit harder than usual. And when the day finally got there, I was greeted with open arms. Everybody was all excited, but I barely got through the doors when I realized that it was all over before I ever spoke one word. And I knew it because there was this one woman who began to greet me. And she came up to me, and I hadn't seen her. I'm sure this lady was probably there when I was baptized back in 1960. And she came in, and she saw me, and she gave me this great big hug, and then she took my face in her hands, and she said, "Oh, welcome home, Rusty." I still remember when you were just a bitty baby. Jesus said no prophet is accepted in his hometown. And at that point, I had no authority at all. If you were here last Sunday in church, you know that we've not moved any. Jesus has just preached his 9-word sermon. Now today, like Paul Harvey used to say, we hear the rest of the story. And it all starts innocently enough. Friends and family have welcomed Jesus home, and they file into the synagogue, and they're smiling, and everything is going just fine. Jesus has turned out to be a fine young man. They're patting him on his back, welcoming him home, and everything else. And then Jesus starts to speak. At first we are told all of them speak well of him. But then Jesus makes a terrible mistake. The mood gets downright nasty, doesn't it? When they sense that Jesus is attacking what is most near and dear to them. Their own church, their own people. And he does so by telling 2 ancient stories from their own Bible. Right? One story is about a widow who lived in a God-forsaken land called Sidon. The other one is the story of Naaman, who was the general of the army of one of their arch enemies, Syria. In other words, Jesus has threatened them. And the common thread between these two is that these 2 people were considered by most folks back then to be God-forsaken, pagans, enemies of God's chosen people, which meant that they also had no place in church that day, maybe. They had no place in God's kingdom. And yet, according to Jesus, they do. In other words, Jesus is reminding the Nazarenes, his own family and friends, just how wide open God's heart truly is. Which apparently was a little bit more open than their own hearts. Imagine that. Well, thanks be to God, we're more sophisticated than those people in Nazareth. I suspect you've not tried to toss any preachers into the bay lately. But I wonder if we can sometimes be as hard-hearted as they are. And I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. Because I know that sometimes I'm not always as open-hearted as I'd like to think I am. The story I want to tell is about a fellow. He was not a soldier or a widow, but he certainly did not look like anybody else who showed up for church in Noonan, Georgia that Sunday. He was unkempt, had long hair, carried a duffel bag in one hand and a guitar in the other. And I met him in the corner of the parish hall. He was drinking a cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup. You see, I knew the trick. You show up for church on a Sunday morning, and the pastor will always give you money. "Good morning," I said. "I heard you were looking for me." "Nope. No, actually, I was just here. I want to go to church." I was a bit thrown off guard by that. That was not usually how the conversation would go. "You live around here?" "Nope, just passing through. I'm on my way to California, and I won't get to be able to get to church in a while, so I wanted to go to church." So I said, "Welcome." See, I know another trick. Show up in church on Sunday, go to church, sit in the back, and when everybody's gone, then ask the pastor for money. So he went to church. He sat on the back row like a lot of visitors often sit in church. He pressed his face into his hands during the prayers. He listened to the sermon like he was actually listening. Then he came up for communion like he had done it before. And after the service, I was perched on the steps outside, greeting people like we always do. Great sermon. Have a great week. And out of the corner of my eye, he passed right on by. Never stopped, never said a word. I guess he just wanted to go to church. I never even asked him his name. All of us, I think, can fall prey to being a bit exclusive in our faith. In a way I think that is understandable, right? I mean, it's a crazy word out there. It's confusing. It's dangerous. I mean, it's so much safer to surround ourselves with people that are easy to love, right? People who think like we do, vote like we do, look like we do, worship like we do. And we see it all around us. Just go into a cafeteria at school and you'll see how they group themselves at lunch. How about the ways that we group ourselves in neighborhoods sometimes? The danger, though, is when that begins to filter in how we talk about church and how we think about God. What I mean is that we are here today, I suspect, in part because we want a God who meets us where we are. We're worn out. We're beat up. We simply want to be at rest for a few minutes. We want a Savior who knows us as we are, loves us as we are. We want a God who is safe and secure. And that is something important, and it is an important part of the truth of God. But it's only a part of the truth of God and our faith in God. And it's only a part of the Jesus that we follow. Right? I mean, after all, Jesus was born into the world to stretch out his arms to reach the whole world and everyone in it, so that we might know that at the heart of God is a God who forgives. A God who forgives and never condemns. A God who loves and never hates. And one of the hardest parts of following Jesus is that our faith in Jesus demands that we stay open to. Staying open to strangers who walk into the doors. Remaining open to new ideas that might just mean our idea is wrong. Being open when somebody confronts us with a truth that angers us. So I want you to simply to think about this question. What is it that Jesus preaches that is hard for you to hear? It's a little more uncomfortable than comfortable. Maybe it's the truth about somebody that you find hard to forgive or trust. Maybe it's the truth that it's not the world that needs to change, but maybe it's me or you. Then again, maybe that what I believe might be the hardest truth of all to believe about God. That is that the truth of God's love is extended to everybody. Everybody. Including you. I just threw you a curveball if you were listening. But think about it. In times of failure and tragedy, in times of sorrow and sadness and despair, during those dark nights of the soul when we are so consumed by shame and guilt and doubt, it's hard to also conclude that maybe we are being rejected by God. My point is this: the widow of Sidon and the soldier Naaman, people who had felt God forsaken, they're still out there. They're still with us. And they may even be in this church today. Maybe it's you. People who are desperately need to know that God's heart is open to them. And God's love that never ends, is patient, kind, bears all things, that it is for them. It is for you. It is for me. I don't know where you see yourself in this story today. Maybe you're a bit disturbed by the news I've shared. Or maybe you're the one who's feeling a bit God-forsaken. I don't know who you are, but I do know this. No matter who you are, no matter where you've been, no matter if you've been in this church all your life, and this is the first Sunday you've been back in a long time, the heart of God is wide open to you. And the love of God is for you, to everyone. And we will offer that to everyone at this table, the gifts of God for the people of God. May that truth comfort you. May it also challenge you. For this gift is not just meant for us alone. It is the gift that is meant for the entire world. And it's up to us to go out there and to open our arms and our hearts as far as we can and let the world know.